Good day and welcome to A Place Called Through. I am your host, Patricia Wade Goings, and we are broadcasting live from WYTV7 Community Broadcasters Network, where we share stories of mission of hope. You know, our mission as hope is to encourage you, to empower you, and hopefully to inspire you. You know, we all go through something. We come to different circumstances and situations. And so today, our guest, Dr. Jennifer, is here with us at A Place Called Through, and she's going to share some educational information with us and hopefully to inspire as well as educate you about autism. Today, we are discussing autism. It's a continuation from our previous story, but we want to give you just a little bit more insight into what is autism. It affects so many people nationwide. And you know, again, at A Place Called Through and WYTV7, as we stated, it is about a mission of hope. And you know, to continue doing this, we ask that you sow your seed into this ministry so that we can continue what we do, helping others and inspiring nationwide. So welcome, Dr. Jennifer, to A Place Called Through.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, we just thank you for taking time out of your schedule to talk to us today about autism. You know, as we said, autism affects many, many, many children nationwide. It's not just in one place. It's a universal thing that happens. And, you know, it begins in children at such an early age, you know, and it's just one of those things, even though it's a nationwide thing, you know, research shows us too, that it is also underfunded. So we want to talk to you again, you know, about autism, how it's shown in children, you know, where does it stem from, and how are children actually progressing with, you know, being diagnosed with autism. So talk to us about what you do and how you got started as, you know, as you stated, a cognitive behaviorist dealing with autism.
Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for having me here. Change happens when dialogue occurs with individuals like yourself. When you pose that question, what is autism? What do we do? That starts a dialogue, and that dialogue can be heard all the way up to governmental levels. And where autism was 10 years ago is so vastly different than where we are today. And that's due to individuals like you pushing the envelope, having these tough conversations. So autism to me is my definition of autism is that it is a brain processing, and there's an impairment within that processing, and it can be caused by many different things. The thing in the field of autism, everyone has their theory and their approach, and interesting enough, each one of them have an impact on this in this big conversation called autism. It is usually kind of picked up by the mom right after the child is born. The mother normally feels, because of the tight connection, that something isn't quite right. And in the past, the doctors used to slide that under postpartum and say, don't worry about it. You're just being an overprotective mom. So the mom gets quieted. And at the same time, this concern grows inside them because they can feel, because this child grew inside them, so they can feel this child. They can feel that something isn't quite right. And in the past, it wasn't generally picked up until usually about 6 or 7. Well, those are 6 or 7 years that services could have been provided to start initiating the brain processing between the left and right hemisphere. So there's usually a language concern. There's also an oversensitivity, which occurs in eye contact. When we make eye contact, which is a cultural thing to begin with, right? In some cultures, eye contact is considered disrespectful, but in North America and other countries, eye contact, if we don't make it, then we must be shifty, or there might be something we're kind of hiding. But within that eye contact, there's a lot of exchange that happens, and not a lot of nonverbal exchange. And with children with autism, they're very sensitive to other individuals. You know, when we can sit beside someone and they're having a happy day, And then all of a sudden that just kind of touches us and we feel all excited too.
Mhm.
And the same with someone is not in a place of where they feel centered and balanced, and they sit beside us, but they're smiling, but we feel this kind of prickliness, right? Well, children with autism, that's 1,000 times stronger for them because of their sensitivity. Now, then you start to add diet into that. Oh, I'm sorry, I cut you off. You were going to ask a question. I apologize.
just
I get all excited about this.
No, I just wanted to interject here because talking about the mom, because autism starts in children maybe at an early age, around 3 or so. Is that accurate? That, you know, it's
Well,
often
it's
diagnosed by
detected.
that time?
Well, it's detected by 3.
Okay. Okay.
So that's when it's very clear, because it's very difficult to diagnose an infant, because there may be other things that are going on. And one of the first things I say to parents when they come to me is, let's start eliminating to make sure that there's not a hearing impairment. Let's make sure that their eyesight is within the range it should be. So we want to eliminate health things first. I was working on a case where they had an individual and a little boy, and they thought that he had autism. But after testing it, because the first thing I do is, okay, let's get up to the medical field. Let's get the feedback from them before we start addressing this behaviorally. Well, it turned out the little young fellow had a hearing impairment. He had been swimming in the ocean, and he had got an ear infection, and it was left undetected. And that was what was causing him to be delayed in his speech, because he had had this ear infection for a long time. And, you know, all the kids swim in the ocean here in Hawaii. It's sort of all part of the culture. And so ear infections occur a lot, and they heal sometimes naturally. Sometimes you have to get antibiotics. But in this situation, they were sure that the child was autistic. And after we had gone through all the different levels of, let's check this, let's check that, the child wasn't. The child actually had the ear infection that caused the damage, which impaired his speech, which was causing another whole symptoms that kind of showed up like autism.
But with this little boy, you had an experience as a counselor and a therapist with him, whereas you were trying to make this communication happen with this little boy. And a lot of times the communication may be delayed or, you know, ignored in certain cases. And as you stated before, you know, each case is different. Autism in each child is not the same thing. So, but you had an experience with a little boy. So talk to us about that. How was that, and how did you get through to him when otherwise, you know, the child was just diagnosed, but nobody was breaking through to him? So how did you get through to this little kid?
I looked at his world. The first thing I always do is I look at being respectful. This is another individual that is trying to fit into society, and they're having a difficult time. And there's a lot of trauma around that. So I tend to be very respectful and sensitive to that. So when in this situation, I was called in on a case, and I advise in teams a lot. So I help move members of the team around, or maybe if someone's burned out, I help bring in new members and get it cohesive. And in this situation, I was asked to come in because they were looking at letting go a couple of the team members. And it turned out they didn't. It was, we just needed to find a way to connect with this young man. And so I had a meeting with the parents, and I asked them, okay, so what are some of the things that this child likes? Oh, fish, all sorts of fish. And in Hawaii here, we have colorful fish beyond belief, right? So beautiful, beautiful fish. And so I thought about it and I thought about it. And I always ask for inspiration, because I don't have the answers, but I know that I'll be guided to the answers. And in most cases, the child usually guides me in that direction, because they're kind of going like, over here, this is what's really going on for me. And so in this situation, the child was looking down, and they had it tested first to make sure there was no neck injuries. There was nothing there. The child was not comfortable interacting with the world to face them. So he would always look down, and he would look up the odd time, but his life remained focused downward. And so I thought, okay, so here are our clues. He looks downward. He loves fish. So what can we do with that information? Because he is communicating to us. So I went to the woman who does my nails and I said, you know what, can you draw a goldfish on both of my big toes? And they were like, okay. So then it was the time to meet the child. And so we went over to the place, their home. They brought the child out and I didn't say anything because there's nothing to say. There's no hello, because we know it's going to fail. There's no make eye contact, all that stuff. I wanted it to be successful and I wanted the child to feel empowered. So I slid my big toes, because everyone wears slippers here, down. So his head's down and he looks down and he sees the fish. Then from there, he starts to look up a little bit more, not all the way, but up like this. And then I said to him, hello. And he just, there was a smile. And so we had contact. He let us in his world. So when I advised the team, we need to do everything that is interactive with him around fish and hopefully information that he doesn't know about. And so I said, your team's good. Your team's fine. You don't need to get rid of anyone. It's, let's just frame it this way. And
okay. Just hold that thought for me. Let's take a commercial break and we'll come back and continue talking about the success behind this story with the little boy. And then hopefully we'll get into the little girl that you were also able to deal with. So stay right there with that thought, Dr. Jennifer, and we'll be momentarily after this commercial. Again, you're listening to A Place Called Through, and we're going to go to a commercial break and we'll be right back shortly.
Mr. Happy Living here. I love good things made for good people. That's why I love Happy Living's online e-course. It's an 8-week-long deep dive into you and the inspired life you want to live. The life you were put here on this earth to live. The one that you and only you can live. 8 weeks of lectures and ideas and topics and supporting materials and powerful self-improvement tools. All designed for you. All designed to help you create the tools and the power and the confidence you need to discover your purpose and to discover the life you were meant to live and to feel incredibly inspired and motivated to decide you will live your life to its fullest. It's all designed to help you create the unique and distinct philosophy of you and your inspired life. Go to happyliving.com, select our e-course, and save $100 with promo code WYTV7. And for every enrollment, I'll donate another $100 to WYTV7. For $300 and about 30 hours, I promise you'll never, ever be the same again.
And welcome back to A Place Called Through, where we're broadcasting from WYTV7, Community Broadcasting Network. Again, I am your host, Patricia Wade Goings, and we're here today talking to Dr. Jennifer, who's sharing her story of how she's helping children with autism. You know, autism, it does affect children universally. And as we stated previously, sadly, even though it is a universal matter, funding seems to not be readily available for such case. So, but we want to talk about this little boy that she was previously talking about, how the breakthrough came, you know, for him. Sometimes children look this way, and as adults, we look in different directions. Unbeknown to therapists, sometimes, you know, these are the breakthrough things that we're looking for. And Dr. Jennifer just was in the right place, I would say, as they say, at the right time to help this little kid who constantly just looked down. And in his looking down, the discovery of what he liked became the solution to helping him get through. So Dr. Jennifer, if you would pick up where we left off about how he liked the fish and what you did to help him.
So once he discovered the fish on my toes, he, you know, as I said, he looked up slightly and at that point, there's a connection and there's a hello. And we just worked with the team. I worked with the team, and we got them all situated around all activities with fish. And some of the things is I recommended that the staff wear t-shirts with fish on them, different things that's going to elevate him wanting to connect with people. So, and his math and his English was all around fish. He loved the internet, so it was Googling, in which he was already doing, but he would get that was his reward, to be able to Google different things about fish. And so, but the team that he had was very good. They were just stumped. And a lot of times that happens when we're involved and we're in that moment, and everyone on that team was trying to reach this child. And sometimes you need an outsider that will come in and consider looking at it in a different way.
And you did just that, you looked in the mirror, but you saw something different because you saw the fish, and that was opening up that communication. Is it not true that autism is more, I guess, defined in boys or than it is in girls?
They are originally, in the numbers, when they started collecting the data, it was predominantly more male. But as the years have progressed along, the numbers for girls is rising. And for males, it's still predominant, but women, or the females, the girls, are gaining ground. So autism is now being found in females more. One of the aspects of diagnosing autism is verbal. And girls tend to be more verbal than males. So you end up with a lot of females that will be missed from their diagnosis. And we're having an interesting phenomenon occurring with women that are adults that could have been diagnosed when they were children, but because they're verbal, they kind of slid under the fence, sort of a thing. And they're seeking help now on relationship buildings, because what happens is they have relationships that keep failing. And the common denominator is them and how they process information. But if that had been picked up when they were younger, but because one of the predominant features was verbal, and boys tend to develop verbalness later than females. It's just how the brain develops for both male and female.
That's interesting. Can you share with us anything that you can relate to with a little girl to show, we want to show the difference in how the girls and the boys differ in the autism? How it's affecting them?
How I started in the field of autism was, I tend to take on very hard, difficult cases. And I was contacted and they said, we have this little girl, she's 3. She has bitten someone and it's drawn blood, which broke the skin. So we're going to have to follow a different protocol with her. Will you come in and take a look at her and see if we can stop this from happening? Because the school, wanted to keep this child included. They wanted to find a way to this child. So I went in, this little girl was in the corner. She was preschool, so the parents were dropping her off, and the parents were doing all that they could too. And the child was in the corner, and of course she would urinate in the corner. She would just stay in that corner for the entire time that she was in preschool. And so they brought me in and I took a look. Well, first of all, they contacted me and they said, she has a diagnosis of autism is what. And I said to her, I'm not quite sure what autism is. And that was when it was kind of simmering under the surface. It'd pop up here and there, but nobody really knew what it was. And so I said, okay, I'm a cognitive behaviorist. Let's see what I can do. I may not be able to do anything. So when I saw this little girl in the corner, she was terrified. She was traumatized. So the last thing for me to do would be to force engagement. So I decided that I would get a chair, and I got a few outfits that were exactly the same. And I sat in the chair with a Vogue magazine, and during the whole time, which was difficult because you don't realize how often you have to actually use the washroom, but until you have to sit in a chair for any length of time. And I would just keep turning the pages. So what I wanted to show her was consistency and that she was safe and I wasn't going to ask anything of her. And so we did this for a few days. And it was funny because I was beginning to think I didn't know what I was doing and I'd made a huge mistake. So in my mental dialogue, I stopped trusting and I started making it about me. And so I was still turning the pages. And then I stopped because you start thinking and you don't realize that you stop doing everything that's wrong. It's interesting, whenever we stop believing that we're being guided, we start to make it about ourselves and we stop. We stop everything we're doing. And so in this situation, all of a sudden, this tiny little hand came in and started turning the pages. Because in her world, turning the pages of what I was doing, so I had stopped doing it. So she was now going to assist me. So she came out of her world to engage with me. So I turned to the little sweet darling, and she was adorable, tiny little thing. And I said, all right, we got a lot of work. And she was a lot more verbal. And so she would communicate with me a lot more than I sort of found when I first started working with boys. And she taught me everything about autism. So she was the best teacher I could have ever had. And she's now in university now and doing life, I guess, is about the best way. It's autism does not go away. You learn to interact with society knowing that this is your framing, right? Like each one of us have our own framing in which we interact with the world. And then we learn, because we're better at reading social cues, how to adjust ourselves. Well, with children with autism, they don't have that adjusting. And then you have a language barrier, you have sensitivity. So their worlds must be like, and I'm guessing this, it's like being in a nightclub with noises and sounds and things changing so much. How can you feel safe? And then along comes individuals like myself, and we march in and we're like, okay, let's do this. And the child's in a nightclub situation where they don't know whether this is safe or not. So then you're going to get a lot of behaviors, and you're going to get a lot of aggressive behaviors. And then they learn, I can push you away by being aggressive.
Because they think that's the norm for them. That's what they know to do. Their sensors are saying you got to be protective, and this is the way that they protect themselves. What are some of the challenges outside of the lack of funding for autism?
Geez, it depends on the situation. If it's a family that's in denial, the family can be the problem. If it's, sometimes it can be location. I have a project that I'm participating in Bangladesh, and a lot of times it's get resources out to them, and location can be a barrier. Us as service providers, as professionals, we are also limited as well. And as we progress along, we're all in a learning state. And when we forget that, I think that's when we go sideways. And I think that ends up becoming one of the biggest barriers. But if we constantly remain in the question of how can we do better? How can we approach this differently? Because you look at, it's the same thing for our society.
So what would you say, or what would you suggest, or what would be your idea of, as a service provider, what can we do to I guess, empower this fight for autism, to help these children and help these people that are diagnosed with such issues? Because again, we keep repeating funding. You have to have the funding, to move things forward. But until that happens, what can we do as a nation, as a community, as service providers to help this matter of autism?
Support whenever you see it. So if you're in Kmart, if you're in the supermarket and you see a child having a tantrum, and the parent is kind of lost, or a child is trashing a place or whatever, have compassion for the parent. Because children with autism appear typically. So if you look at them, they appear to be nothing more than an unruly, undisciplined child. And because there's no obvious physical impairment that says, oh, I understand. And what we tend to do when we see parents out is we judge them. We judge them harshly. So maybe take a moment and give them some positive energy. And so I think that's one of the biggest things that we can do to assist other parents.
Well, Dr. Jennifer, we thank you for being our guest today at A Place Called Through. And before we close up, we want you to, if you will, give our listeners and our viewers, those that are dealing with this autism, man, just a quick word of encouragement or inspiration to them. And also share with anybody, that's listening and tuning into this show today, how they can connect with you on any projects, phone numbers, emails, and such as if they want more information. But I want to share first, there is a national number for autism.
Yes.
And that number is 1-877-622-2884. Again, it is 877-622-2884. And that's the National Autism Association. Help is there for you. Dr. Jennifer, if you would, go ahead and give those words of encouragement for us. And again, we do thank you.
Yes, please call that number. They have enormous amount of resources, and explain to them what you need, and they will start getting you in those directions. The number one thing I say to parents is breathe. It's going to be messy, but we're going to be able to do this together, is the number one encouragement I always say, because there's an isolation feeling. There's a shame feeling. And the other thing too is, if the parents have faith, I like to get them connected back up with their churches, get them back connected into their spiritual area that they once belonged to, but because of the child and, not fitting in and causing disruptions, get that back, that connection, that we're there for you. It's messy, but we'll figure it out.
Can you share with them how to connect with you if someone wants to follow you on Facebook or your blogs or your books or phone numbers? Because we're kind of like running out of time, unfortunately.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, so I can be reached at an email, drdustow@gmail.com. That's about the best way to contact me, because if you call me, it ends up going on a list. But emails, I tend to get up in the middle of the night and early in the morning and do my emails. I also have a couple of books. I have this one here. I don't know if you can see that. There we go. And this can be located on several different sites. I think it's in 27 languages. And then what I did to make it even simple, I created another book, which you can locate on Amazon. It's called Embracing Calmness. And you can also, if you're an Amazon member, you can get it free. I also have a few apps out. One is called Talk, T-A-L-K, DRJ, and it's an artificial intelligence that works on speech. I also have another one. It's called Happy, H-A-P-P-Y, DRJ, and that's on Apple and Google, or it's an Android version too. And that works on social stories, as well as a set of midline exercises to create communication between the left and right hemisphere.
Well, we certainly want to thank you for sharing that information. It has been a real privilege to have you as my guest here on A Place Called Through, where we're broadcasting at WYTV7 Community Broadcasters Network. I am the host, Patricia Wade Goings. And if you've been inspired or you have an inspiration story and you want to share it, please contact me in area code of 843-608-9744 by email at pgoingswp@gmail.com. Hey, listen, go to my website, www.willpowerthecalltoriseabove.org for upcoming events. Also, follow me on Facebook, A Place Called Through, at Willpower, The Call to Rise Above. It has been my pleasure to have you again as my guest, as we've been talking to Dr. Jennifer today on autism, what makes the difference. And you can help make that difference. So that seed, don't forget, to our ministry to help us to encourage, inspire, and educate others as we do so globally. Happy New Year to you. God blessings and love to you.